And also for the ones that speak Spanish, the broadcast session has uh, uh, Spanish broadcast in case you wanted to or you need it. Well, I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, you watching my screen? Because I don't know. Thank you, Liv.
Yeah.
Uh, well, you already know that the name of this session is, sorry, I need to come back on I versus body, how can we say as women or agenda debate people on social media? I started to doing this session and I'm planning because during the pandemic, I realized that most of the content, the people that I know that were artists or activists were uh, like censored without any reason. Most of them say me they publish some photo of their work or what they're doing and just disappear. Those was censored by community standards, and they start and then try to ask why the content was removed because the another content that are similar is they aren't removed. So they never receive a reply about it. They just get the content removed. So they start to limiting the capacity of them to spread themselves in social media. But and as a young and very curious person, I started to see if this just was one thing that happened in some places and with some kind of persons. But and I realized that it just happened with some women that are activists and some people that are gender diverse, and not all gender diverse people, especially with gender diverse people of color. The content are moderated, are censored, and disappear more often. So I try to connect with friends that I have around the world, and even I had two examples of what how they suffer of this kind of content moderation, and and how they address this. And if you have any question, you can ask me at any time, or you can interrupt me if you have something to add it to the conversation, because I don't want this to be just a conversation or on myself. The objective of this is particularly is to given to get more affirmative action algorithms to correct real life bias that prevent women and gender diverse people to their full participation and rights in the present and the future we are inventing, because right now we already know that our present and future is internet. The pandemic showed us that, and the use of automated decision making system and machine learning had to improve and include in some way this bias that they have. And the way they can make it, I think, is to change the data. the data will be really important to change this automated decision making that I'm being using right now in social media to um, to make content moderation. That's it. Let's go to some examples because I already told about the problem. This is an example that one of the posts that was removed from Facebook. These two persons are a friend of mine. They live in California, Estados Unidos, in USA. Sorry for the Spanish there. And they published a video, and the video was removed because because it contained adult or sexual explicit content. So they asked why what part of the video had that, and they started to see the video completely again, and the only part that they think about was that could have that kind of content. It was exactly this photo, just this photo. They are just two persons with the front together. Yeah, that's nothing else. So they want to they want to they want to understand why if the suspects that's if that was real they were they were labeled as adult and sexually explicit content just for that. So they changed the that photo for a for a picture or a straight couple, and the content was approved without any problem. So they asked to Facebook why the picture of the two of them doing the same thing as the two straight people actually was uh, uh, one approved and the other no. So Facebook never replied to that. They just say again it was based on community standards and never were clear about it, never were clear on how they do the content moderation and how they what was the rules of the social media in this case, and which tool they are using to address these issues, because this was pretty much they upload the video, this happened, the content moderation appeared as adult and sexually explicit content, and they didn't understand because with the same we a picture of two straight people doing the same thing, they didn't receive the warning. The next is this. I think pretty much a lot of people hear about it. The TikTok, that this is one of the social media that I added to my research this year, is that was restricting some LGBT hashtags in some countries that are really conservative. And those really, and so for doing this, they are basing their technology in they're basing the technology in place the country where their hashtag come from, and ban the hashtag or shadow banning the content from those countries. So that this is affecting the rights or the digital rights of the people that are gender diverse in those countries, especially in, for example, uh, 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 Russia, Jordan, Bosnia Herzegovina, Poland. So this is becoming an issue for TikTok, and they say they are addressing this, but together with with a friend of mine. We asking to the TOTUS release their community standards because we want to know exactly what was part of the community standard and which kind of tools they're using to make those community standards work, and they actually don't do it. So it's pretty fuzzy. All of this is like we have so many interests in them in the way, and we can really access to it. And this last one is from a friend in Buenos Aires, Argentina. She's a photographer. She's taking pictures or body body positive woman, and she made this, and she allowed me to share it with you, where she asked why their pictures are censored. So she made all these questions for every kind of picture that was censored during a week that she was publishing his work. And then she compared it to this. But what happened when women are just showing just an objects, just something to consume, barely nothing? What happened then? Is it nothing? Because all the time that she report these photos that actually can be more that similar to the photos that she is publishing on his social page for his project that shows body positivity or 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 less explicit than this one. Nothing happened. The photo, it seems not to be against the community standards. So there's some bodies that can be allowed in social media and others that cannot. So there is this double standard about that. And it seems like when the body woman, especially the woman, uh, is for consumption or can be an object, is valid. But when it's not, you had to censor. So I'm going to start sharing here and open the conversation for anyone who want to ask something or want to add something. Go ahead, Libby.
So I wanted to ask you if you could talk about automated decision making a little bit more. I mean, is this something that is this a functionality, or is this human? Is this a human interactive decision point that's made by, say, developers? And is this something we can change? I mean, would this functionality need to be somehow described as a use case before it's built into systems? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it totally makes sense. Actually, the decision to make this automatic decision making well can be changed from the data, because the data is the one that is biased, because the society is biased. All algorithms are biased. So we try to from the core algorithm to be the less biased as we can.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered the question.
Well, it kind of does, and it doesn't. But you know, I think because we're at the start of this new revolution, it would make sense that we put things in place to prevent these biases, you know, coming up again and again and again. And if we can do it early, we can put systems in place early on. It feels like this is something that just needs to be changed, whether it's code-based, programmer, developer, human-based changes. Whether
Yes,
you know whether we can
exactly.
start the process.
It's actually that. It's actually we need persons that change the way they see the things, and because before coding, we need to be aware that these automatic content moderation tools are going to be used by persons, and we have to be conscious also that we have biases. So we need to do this in the more ethical way possible, because the idea is not to increase the the, the inequalities between people.
Sure. No, that makes sense. But it will be interesting to understand Facebook and all those other platforms, what the decision making looks like from their perspective, and how they then filter out and then push out information to users. You know, where is the balance? Who decides on the balance? Who decides whether it's 10% or 90% here or 90% here? And do you know what I mean? How is that decision
Yes, I
being
totally
made?
understand.
It feels like each sorry to cut in, but it feels like, so whenever Facebook reports something or says that your post has been taken down, it always says that it doesn't conform to community standards. And I've got a sneaking suspicion that community standards are set up by region. So for example, a photo of two women kissing would be okay, or hopefully should be okay in the UK, but is more likely to be flagged as not okay in Russia, for example. So it's, I guess, if you want to tackle this issue, you need to tackle communities. And because the internet is basically one massive community, you have to engage with multiple governments, and governments don't like each other. So that's, I think it's a really big issue for all of us.
That's true. Usnis,
yeah, so I had a couple of questions as well. So is the image recognition algorithm being used? So obviously from your initial example, it's recognizing, you know, female, and for some reason it's saying it doesn't match the community standards and we're not going to allow this ad, whereas it's allowing like a heterosexual sort of you know, male, female, or and so on. So in the context in which the and I missed maybe the national context, somebody was mentioning that this has been, and along the same lines, probably community jurisdiction or not nation specific community standard. In that kind of, is there legislation protecting the rights of you know, sort of different sorts of associations between people? And if there isn't, then it's really difficult to convince Facebook to or any other social media platform to implement that policy when the legislation doesn't exist in the first place. It's a bigger battle. It's not that it's a battle that shouldn't be fought or shouldn't be an issue that shouldn't be addressed, but it just seems like it's a bigger battle if there's the equality isn't assured in the law in the first place. Yeah.
I think in cases when equality is in the law, so another example from the UK is there's a TV show, Dancing on Ice. It's predominantly man and a woman dancing, you know, it's a celebrity show. And not too long ago, they had a same-sex couple skate. And even though same-sex marriage is legal in the UK, and like civil partnerships and actual marriages, and same couples in same-sex relationships can adopt, so like they have legal equal rights, but for some reason that being shown on TV had massive backlash. So it's more of a, even though the law is there, not everyone agrees with the law, and that's, I think you have to literally change everyone's perceptions to have true equality, because the law doesn't, the law is not the law, if that makes sense. Like legally, yes, but people are the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Always the social change comes before the phones before the phones after, sorry, phone after the law. No ways, never before. So that's one of the things that happens sometimes. We have to do this thing at the same time because we need to do these algorithms inclusive and more diverse from the beginning. We had to solve those barriers from the beginning. And thankfully, we have now in some companies are working with ethical committees to do that. I know but some aren't. I hope in the future they started to do it, or that would be the normal thing to do, because we need an ethical background in the implementation of the different artificial intelligence that we will be using from now on. So it's very much that. Exactly, Marlene. The problem is because most of the social media are globally. It's not local there. So, and to solve that, it had to be more conflict.
Yeah. So which law are we talking about? Which law are we implementing? And how do you implement an international law that applies to every single culture? And so it's difficult to do that, but that's why there are these ethics committees that are trying to, set up these guidelines to try and at least make intermediary companies like Facebook, like Twitter, all of these be held up to a certain standard for diversity and inclusiveness. It doesn't mean that it will not have its problems. I don't think this has been resolved yet in terms of how culturally diverse the world is. So what's acceptable in one place is not acceptable in another place. And some people are very happy that these things are taken down. Some people are very upset, and rightly so. So it's a thin line, and I don't think anybody has yet found a solution to that.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, my major bet right now is for an ethical artificial intelligence. We have to point to that.
Yeah, if I could just jump in. My name is Alexandra. I'm Ukrainian, but currently I'm working in an IT company in Germany. And I wanted to say actually thank you for thinking and organizing this panel, because I think since the pandemic had started and we were all quarantined in our homes, it became literally impossible to meet together and discuss feminist topics, feminist issues that worry us in our local places, and all discussions just moved online. And this is indeed a super important issue now, that so many feminists are basically losing their voices because of shadow banning or because of algorithms, they cannot reach each other or their audiences. And these are really great examples which you showcased. I mean, I'm not Russian, but I know that in Russia there is actually a law that forbids the propaganda, as they call it, of same-sex relationships. So I think TikTok, just as a private company, made this decision in order to not to have any legal issues, but also it is of course less safe, would be less safe for people even to post their opinions on TikTok, because they could have actual legal problems later on from their government for a so-called propaganda of same-sex relationships. So this is, I feel like this is like the whole topic to uncover in even in a different discussion or a panel. But I have maybe like a short question or a possible discussion to this group, because I'm obviously not an expert in AI, but what I've learned so far through all the panels at the Mozilla Fest is that the good AI is able to produce good results and moderate online platforms, for example, by reducing the amount of hate speech there, right? But the key for the good performance is actually a good data. And
Yes.
what would be your ideas? How can we search for the good data to feed the algorithms? Because it's also, it feeds so much into all those discussions, you know, of privacy and how is our data used. And I feel like it's like a vicious circle, because we don't want to share more data with the companies, but we also want the companies to have the good data to build good algorithms for a better web. So I'm very lost in specifically this topic for the expression and political views online. Where would we find the good data in order to improve the algorithms? What do you think?
Well, let me think. it's, it's quite hard, the question, because I'm thinking on that one too. And I came from the global south. I'm from Colombia. So for me, there is not much representation of how we understand the things in artificial intelligence. So usually I face problems with some implementation of artificial intelligence, because they no one develop for people like me. So I understand that that is because of data. So for me, one of the solutions is that all these groups that are not, no, that we are right now not part of the how to say it, but the ones that are doing this artificial intelligence start to doing it, because that will improve the data eventually. Yeah, I think if we want more feminist artificial intelligence, we need more feminists doing artificial intelligence. If we want more black inclusive artificial intelligence, we need more black people doing that and addressing that some artificial intelligence are biased because of the race or the color of the skin. So I think it's for me that is one of the many solutions. I think that could be a lot of more.
Thank you for answering.
Yeah, I've also thought about this because, like when we were talking about in the context of just photos being straight up taken down from Facebook, half of that process is manual, so people just looking through it, and that goes back to people are the problem. But half of that process is algorithms and artificial intelligence, and the way these systems learn is by ingesting loads of data. Now, for example, if you were to make the perfect Facebook, say you took all of Netflix and you looked at everything scene by scene, and anything that was marked explicit content by Netflix you assumed was explicit content. Everything that wasn't. Even if you look through that, there's a very small section of, say, like LGBTQ romance films, so just photos of people kissing, or movies of people just hugging and kissing. That's very PG-13. That's not explicit. So again, it comes down to representation, and I think it's not just representation in tech, because AI is vastly data driven, and the industries are moving into a more inclusive space, but we just need more content. But how can you create more content when your content gets taken down? That's a weird paradox there.
Interesting content. I like it. Marlene wants to say something, right?
Okay, so just for Alexandra, I think that the comment is great. Where do we find good data? The key is good data, and where do we find good data? It's a very critical question because that's what algorithms are based on. I think there is a panel here on MozFest that is going to discuss something called hate base. I don't know if anybody heard of it. Hate base.
Yes, I have actually already today have been at the presentation. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
But please continue.
No, so I mean, this is part of where we can build upon it. I don't find it great. I mean, I looked at some of the stuff on it, and I think it is a good beginning that we can build on to find good data. So
that's true. Thank you, Marlene. That's true. We have actually at that panel we had a discussion because so far they are trying to collect data on hate speech, basically so texts, so written posts on social media in order to detect it. However, it was mentioned that people are circumventing or basically abusing the algorithm by either, for example, not using the correct spelling of the words, or I don't know, they get creative in other ways with using emojis. So that's true. That's already a great start for a collection of such data. You are absolutely right. It's a very interesting project.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the Arabic there because the English, I figured a lot of people will look at. So I looked a little bit at the Arabic, and some of it is okay. Some of it is just plain talk that is not really hate speech at all. So it surprised me that it was there. But like I said, I mean, the important thing is, I think it's a good base, and we can build it. So
that's true.
Oh, that's another issue, Veronica, that you're saying there.
Can I jump in?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
This is a conversation.
Yes, we are talking about algorithms, but we have also to keep in consideration that a lot of content moderation is often carried out by humans. And for example, we have content moderation in Italy is often outsourced in Albania. And you know, Albania they speak Italian, so they can understand the meaning, but they do not. I mean, they understand the words. For example, that maybe are labeled as hate speech or forbidden content, but they cannot fully figure out their meaning in the context or in the cultural context. For example, when I see in Italy, there is a wide acceptance of lesbian or gay kisses, for example. We see a lot in movie and programs, TV programs, for example. And lately it's happening more and more. But you know, when you go online, it seems that the perception of content moderators are different from Italian people, for example. So Italian people tend to accept certain features, certain behaviors, but content moderators are not. So we are also to try to think that in a globalized world, outsourcing content moderator to people that are not fully integrated in some culture may be detrimental. But you know, for Italy is this, but I know that would be a little more complex, more complicated. For example, for content moderation in China or Russia, because you know, in Russia, as Alexandra was saying before, it's considered propaganda. So, but it would be a huge step toward a more open and diverse digital space if we allow society, more open society, to actually moderate their own content. For example, outsource, for example, content moderation to Italian, for Italian content. So this is it.
Thank you, Veronica. Yeah, Libby was saying something similar. Or Marlene want to continue? Yes, Marlene or Libby.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point, Veronica, and I think the context of the data is always missing. And we've had a case in the US very recently, I think last week or so, where images of nude slaves were banned because they were nude, not because they were slaves.
Or slaves.
Yeah, so it was the context of the nudity here is completely different from a porn context or a model context. It has a historical significance. Of course, like it or leave it, we can talk about that. But the historical context was very important for the people who posted it, and it was taken down. So context is very important.
Yeah, totally agree. That's one of the missing pieces all the time, and we see it in many examples in probably all the countries that all the time is happening. Here is happening sometimes also with some images or indigenous people or Afro-descendants. They're taken out of context and well, they're taken down. We can do anything about it, it seems. Libby?
Yeah, I think I mean, everybody is saying pretty much what I'm thinking anyway, but I think maybe from a developer, I know I talk about the developers and the product owners and the user cases surrounding these data sets, which are generated by big companies, need to be fine-toothed combed before anything is built. And what I mean by that is that the taxonomies that are used to generate these data sets need to also include the context. So if you have an image of, say, two women with their heads together, what does that mean? Somebody physically, a human physically, needs to go in and look at that image. Or in the same way as Marlene mentioned about the image of the Black slaves, somebody needs to apply that context to, or that taxonomy, that information to that image before it gets uploaded. And that image should have that metadata attached to it, which gives it context, which then is then built into the data set itself, which then says, this image can be shown on this platform for these individuals because that is what is allowed based on the parameters that are set up by those systems. So it's more about fine-tuning metadata and building new taxonomies, I think.
Yes, I agree.
And P.S., I'm not an artificial intelligence expert at all. I come from a metadata background when I started in this industry, and I love metadata and I love data anyway at the best of times, but I always felt like the developers, the guys that were writing the code, always had more power. And it's unfortunate that, as you mentioned, there needs to be more diverse communities building these things, which will then, you know, improve the outputs of these systems. It's as simple as that.
Yes. Well, my background isn't also data or artificial intelligence. I study communications and then communication studies and then cultural studies. And for some reason, I enrolled in artificial intelligence and then for that because I really like it. But that gave me a more holistic vision of how this to be done in a more ethical and more diversity way, and more inclusive way. Ushnis, do you want to say something? And I think okay.
Yeah, maybe I was just gonna provide a counterpoint to some of the things being said earlier about diverse teams, and I've been looking into it a bit. So many of these projects, especially the big, they're multinational companies. The developing teams are diverse, right? They are based in many countries, but the incentive systems are geared towards like particular, like narrow requirements, right? So the data set, you mentioned the data sets. If you take a global data set, the majority of voices are American and European and so on, right? On the other hand, I've seen AI sort of algorithms developed in India, which replicate the same biases in terms of race, gender, and so on that are from the US, because they're measured to like, the model is measured, they're developing is measured to like a particular American standard, right? So like just simply diversifying a team or even having international development, as long as the standard you're trying to meet, the goals you're trying to meet are set by like an American body or an American company, that's what you'll do, and you're not going to develop anything different. Yeah.
Well, dance. Dance society is one of the problems that we have already right now. If someone wants to say something, because because it's time to wrap up this session, the discussion was really interesting and really dense for all that we say today. Or if someone wants to say something, now it's the time.
So Juan, I just quickly wanted to say, while you were talking and Ushnish was talking as well, I think what you might want to apply to your research is something called ethical demographics. And I've just come up with this. I've worked with lots of advertising agencies in my time who use a lot of behavioral sciences and how consumers think and how they apply a lot of their own research to consumer behavior. I think a lot of this stuff is relevant. It just needs to be fine-tuned to being more, as you say, ethical in the first instance. You know, how do you come up with a certain demographic based on ethics? You know, I think that would be a starting point, because once you come up with that, you come up with then a taxonomy that you can apply to all of those demographics from an ethical standpoint, and then apply it to a system. That's how I would see it. And as I say, I'm not an artificial intelligence. Yeah, I'm not an expert at all.
Okay. Thank you very much to everyone. It was a great conversation, I repeat. And if you want to continue contributing to the discussion, you can write some more inputs in an open document that I going to left here, and will be also in the organizing in the session during the next month. So thank you very much, and it was a pleasure to meet you all and to talk to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you for hosting us.
Bye. Have a good
All right,
weekend.
thank you all.